The Goliath Protocol. The observation deck of the Goliath was eerily silent despite the hundreds of technicians and engineers scurrying about on the lower decks. Commander Ilara Way stood alone before the massive viewport, her reflection ghosted against the backdrop of stars beyond Earth's orbit. The ship beneath her feet, humanity's first true star destroyer, hummed with restrained power. 5 years ago, no one on Earth knew aliens existed. Now, the remains of New Auckland served as a grim memorial to first contact. 3 million dead in a matter of hours when the Kryvax ships descended without warning or mercy. Hull integrity checks complete, Commander, reported Lieutenant Commander Riker, his voice cutting through her thoughts. Engine systems at 98% efficiency. Weed nodded without turning. And the Helios array? A pause. Even her second-in-command couldn't hide his unease. Dr. Thorne reports the primary capacitors are stable. The array is functional. The Helios array, Earth's desperate answer to alien superiority. A weapon system that could tear apart matter at the subatomic level, converting it to pure energy. Some called it monstrous. Why called it necessary? Tell Thorne I want another diagnostic before we break orbit, she ordered. If that array fails during engagement, we're nothing but an oversized target. Yes, Commander. Way finally turned from the viewport, facing the bridge spread out below the elevated observation platform. The Goliath wasn't elegant. No sleek lines or artistic aesthetics like the ships in old sci-fi vids. It was blocky, asymmetrical, and bristling with weapons, a brutalist monument to humanity's newfound understanding that the cosmos wasn't waiting with open arms. It was waiting with teeth. Commander, the communications officer called out, Admiral Chen is requesting final authorization codes before departure. We descended the platform stairs and made her way to the central command station. The holographic display showed Earth rotating slowly below them, serene and oblivious to the warship poised above it. Put him through, she said. Admiral Chen's weathered face materialized above the console. Despite the distance, Wei could see the exhaustion etched in the lines around his eyes. Commander Wei, I'm sending the authorization now, Chen said without preamble. The Defense Council is divided on this mission. Wei's jaw tightened. With respect, sir, they'd been divided since we broke ground on the Goliath. We don't have the luxury of consensus anymore. I know. Chen's gaze hardened. What I need to know is if you can do what's necessary out there. The Kryvax have destroyed 3 colonies and vanish without a trace each time. If you find them. When I find them, Wei corrected. When you find them, Chen continued, they need to understand that attacking humanity has consequences. We nodded. That's why we built this ship, sir. The authorization codes flashed across her personal terminal. Mission parameters scrolled alongside them. Locate Kryvax forces, assess capabilities, neutralize immediate threats, establish communication if possible. Good hunting, Commander, Chen said before his image dissolved. We turned to her bridge crew, all watching her with a mixture of determination and barely concealed fear. None of them had signed up for interstellar war. They'd been astronomers, engineers, and scientists before the Kryvax arrived. Now they were soldiers. Navigation. She called out, plot course for the Kuiper Belt anomaly. Let's see if those energy signatures are our friends. Course plotted, Commander. Estimated arrival. 6 hours at standard drive. Wei settled into her command chair, fingers brushing over the smooth armrests. Take us out, Lieutenant. Quarter power until we clear lunar orbit. The massive engines ignited, pushing the Goliath away from Earth's gravity well with a force that belied its enormous mass. Wei watched on the displays as they passed the lunar colonies, their lights twinkling against the moon's dark surface. Commander, Riker said quietly as he approached her chair, the crew's talking about the Helios array. They're concerned. Wei kept her voice low. They should be. I'm concerned. But the alternative is watching more colonies burn. It's never been field tested at full capacity, Riker pressed. The simulation showed a 30% chance of system overload if we push it past 70%. Then we don't push it past 70, Wei replied sharply, then softened her tone. Look, I know what they're saying, that we're crossing a line with this weapon. Maybe we are, but the Kravax crossed it first. Riker nodded reluctantly and returned to his station. 4 hours into their journey, the alert came. Commander, we're picking up unusual radiation patterns at coordinate point 37 Mark IV, reported the sensor officer, Lieutenant Imani. It's consistent with the Kravax propulsion signature we recorded at New Auckland. Wei was immediately on her feet. Full stop. Power down non-essential systems and engage stealth protocols. The lights dimmed as the Goliath went dark, drifting through the void with only minimal systems active. Bring it up on the main viewer, Wei ordered. The massive screen at the front of the bridge flickered to life, showing the empty space ahead. At first, there was nothing. Then Imani adjusted the sensors. Coastly outlines appeared. 3 vessels, smaller than the Goliath, but with the distinctive elongated organic design of Kravax ships. Scout class, Wei murmured. They're not supposed to be this far into our system. They haven't detected us. Imani confirmed. Their scanning patterns are wideband, not focused. Wei studied the alien ships, her mind racing. This was it. First contact since the attacks. The mission parameters were clear. Assess and neutralize if necessary. Tactical analysis, she commanded. Lieutenant Katri at the weapons station responded immediately. 3 Scout-class vessels, lightly armed compared to their attack ships. Our conventional weapons should be effective, but their maneuverability will make targeting difficult. And the Helios array. Katri swallowed visibly. At current range, even at minimal power, the array would. There wouldn't be much left to study, Commander. Wei nodded grimly. Power up conventional weapons only. Target engines and communication systems. I want one of those ships disabled, not destroyed. Commander, Riker interjected. If we alert them to our presence, they could call for reinforcements. I'm counting on it, Wei replied, her eyes never leaving the screen. We didn't come out here to hide, Lieutenant Commander. We came to send a message. She returned to her chair, feeling the weight of every decision pressing down on her shoulders. Battle stations. Bring all systems to full power and drop stealth protocols on my mark. The bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency, despite the tension crackling in the air. Wei opened a channel to the entire ship. All hands, this is Commander Wei. We have encountered Kravax vessels in our solar system. In moments, we will engage the enemy. Remember New Auckland. Remember why we're here. Wei out. She took a deep breath. Then, Mark. The Goliath roared to life, its massive form suddenly visible against the backdrop of stars as energy coursed through its systems. On the screen, the Kravax ships reacted immediately, breaking formation and accelerating away. They're powering weapons, Chatri announced. Target the lead vessel's propulsion system, Wei ordered. Fire when ready. The Goliath's main cannons discharged with a vibration that ran through the entire ship. Streams of superheated plasma shot across the void, striking the first Kravax ship dead center. Its shields flared briefly before collapsing, and the vessel spun wildly as its engines failed. Direct hit, Chatri confirmed. Target disabled. The other 2 are moving to attack position, Imani warned. They're launching something, reading multiple small objects on intercept course. Defensive countermeasures, Wei commanded. Prepare for impact. The defensive grid activated just as dozens of projectiles slammed into the Goliath's shields. The ship shuddered but held firm. Shields at 82%, reported Riker. Minor damage to outer hull plating on decks 12 through 15. Wei narrowed her eyes. Return fire. Standard missiles, full spread. The Goliath unleashed its arsenal, filling the space between ships with guided projectiles. One of the Kravax vessels managed to evade, but the other took multiple hits, its hull breaching in several places before it exploded in a silent flash. Target destroyed. Chakri confirmed. Remaining vessel is retreating at high speed. Let it go, Wei ordered. Focus on the disabled ship. Tractor beams. Pull it in. I want a boarding team ready in 10 minutes. As the crew carried out her orders, Wei studied the damaged Kryvax vessel now being drawn toward the Goliath's massive hangar bay. It was the first intact alien ship humans had ever captured, and what they learned from it could change everything. Dr. Thorne to the bridge, she called over the comms. Minutes later, the ship's chief scientist arrived, his thin frame practically vibrating with excitement, despite his attempts to maintain composure. You're about to get your wish, Doctor, Wei told him. An alien ship to dissect. Thorne's eyes widened. Incredible. The potential advancements. We could leap forward decades in our understanding of their technology. I'm more interested in their communication systems, Wei replied. I want to know where they came from and what they're planning next. The scientist nodded eagerly. My team is ready, Commander. He was interrupted by a blaring alarm from the sensor station. Multiple contacts, shouted Amani, her voice tight with panic. Massive energy spike 300,000 kilometers out. The main screen shifted to show empty space suddenly tearing open, reality itself seeming to fold as a massive vessel emerged from what could only be described as a tear in spacetime. God in heaven, someone whispered. It dwarfed the Goliath by at least 5 times, its surface rippling with what looked like living metal. It wasn't just a ship, it was a statement of power, of technological superiority that made humanity's greatest achievement look like a child's toy. The disabled Kryvax ship, Wei barked. Is it transmitting? Yes, Commander, confirmed the communications officer. Low-level quantum burst transmission. We didn't detect it because it's not using conventional communications bands. Wei's mind raced. They led us here. This was a trap. The massive Kryvax vessel began to glow, energy building visibly along its central axis. Evasive maneuvers, Wei shouted. All power to forward shields. The Goliath lurched as its engines strained to move its bulk, but they all knew it wouldn't be fast enough. Incoming energy weapon. Imani called out. Wei made a decision that would change the course of the war. Dr. Thorne, power up the Helios array. Target that ship's weapons system only. Thorne paled. Commander, at this range, with a vessel that size, the array cooled. That's an order, Doctor. 30% power, focused beam. As the crew raced to comply, the massive alien vessel fired. A searing beam of energy lanced toward the Goliath, striking its forward shields with devastating force. The ship bucked violently, throwing crew members to the floor as systems overloaded across the board. Shields down to 29%. Riker shouted over the cacophony of alarms. Hull breach on Deck 5. Emergency bulkheads engaging. Helios array at 28% and rising, reported Thorne from an auxiliary station, his fingers flying over the controls. Targeting solution locked. We gripped her chair's armrests so tightly her knuckles whitened. On my mark. Fire. The Goliath shuddered as the Helios array discharged for the first time in combat. There was no beam, no visible projectile, just a distortion in space as the targeted section of the Kryvax vessels simply came apart. Molecular bonds severed, atomic structures collapsed, and matter converted to pure energy in a chain reaction that rippled across the alien ship's hull. The effect was catastrophic. What was meant to be a surgical strike instead triggered a cascading failure throughout the vessel's systems. Great chunks of living metal disintegrated, venting atmosphere and bodies into space. The massive ship listed heavily to one side, secondary explosions blooming across its surface. Array performance exceeded parameters, Thorne reported, his voice shaking. The reaction, it's self-sustaining. That ship is coming apart at the atomic level. On the screen, the Kryvax vessel was being consumed by its own disintegrating matter, a process as beautiful as it was horrifying. The bridge crew watched in stunned silence as humanity's desperate invention proved far more powerful than anyone had anticipated. All hands, brace for shockwave, Y commanded, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. The enormous alien ship convulsed one final time before detonating in a blast that momentarily outshone the distant sun. The Goliath was caught in the wave of energy, systems flickering as the ship rode out the storm. When the sensors finally cleared, nothing remained of the Kryvax vessel except an expanding cloud of particles. Wei slowly got to her feet, surveying the damaged bridge and her shaken crew. "Casualty report," she ordered quietly. 17 confirmed dead, Riker replied after a moment. 38 injured. Emergency teams responding. We nodded grimly. And the disabled scout ship. Destroyed in the blast, Commander. She closed her eyes briefly. Their first potential intelligence source gone. But they had learned something perhaps more valuable. The true power of the weapon they had created, and the lengths to which the Kryvax would go to eliminate them. "Set course for Earth," she ordered. "Maximum sustainable speed." As the Goliath turned toward home, Wei returned to the observation deck alone. The stars no longer seemed cold and distant. They were battlefields waiting to happen, and humanity had just announced its presence with a weapon that could unmake matter itself. "We've picked our side now," she whispered to the void. And there's no going back. Behind her, the ship's systems hummed as the damaged Star Destroyer limped home, carrying with it the knowledge that would forever change humanity's place in the cosmos. The void's answer. The Goliath limped back to Earth orbit like a wounded predator. Repair drones swarmed its hull, welding torn plating and replacing shattered sensor arrays as Commander Ilara Wei stood before the Defense Council, her uniform still bearing traces of smoke and blood. "The Helios array exceeded all theoretical parameters," she reported, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. What was intended as a precision strike cascaded through the enemy vessel's systems. Total molecular disintegration. The 12 council members exchanged uneasy glances. Admiral Chen finally broke the silence. "You're telling us we've built something that could potentially destroy planets?" We met his gaze unflinchingly. "I'm telling you we've built something that saved my ship and crew. And yes, its power is considerable. Monstrous, some would say," interjected Counselor Rivera, her voice sharp. "We authorized a defensive weapon, not a... They led us into a trap," Wei cut in. "That wasn't a random encounter. They wanted to destroy the Goliath before it could become a threat. They're afraid of us now. Or we've just escalated a conflict we barely understand," Rivera countered. Admiral Chen raised a hand, silencing further debate. "What we need now is intelligence. Commander Wei's encounter proves the Kryvax are still operating within our solar system. We need to know why." We nodded. Before its destruction, the disabled scout ship transmitted something to the larger vessel. Dr. Thorne's team managed to intercept part of the transmission. She activated her data pad, and a series of complex symbols appeared above the council table, shifting and reorganizing themselves in patterns that seemed almost organic. "It's not just communication," explained Wei. "It's coordinating data. Navigation points, energy signatures. Dr. Thorne believes they're gathering at these coordinates, approximately 2 light-years beyond Pluto." Silence fell over the chamber as the implication sank in. "A staging area," Admiral Chen said quietly. "For what?" Wei's expression hardened. "There's only one reason to amass a fleet that close to our system." The council chamber erupted into urgent discussions. Wei stood silently, knowing what had to come next, but dreading the order all the same. Her crew had barely survived their first encounter. Asking them to jump directly into a potential Kryvax fleet assembly point was asking them to risk everything. After nearly an hour of debate, Admiral Chen approached her privately. "The council is divided," he admitted. "Half want to recall all ships to Earth. establish a defensive perimeter. The other half want to take the fight to them. Wei finished. Chen nodded grimly. The Goliath is our only ship with both the firepower and the drive system to reach those coordinates quickly. If there is a fleet gathering, we need to know. We knew what he was asking without him having to say it. How soon can your ship be ready? He asked. The hull breaches are sealed. Primary systems are operational. The Helios array. She hesitated. Dr. Thorne says the capacitors were damaged during the discharge. He can't guarantee more than one more firing sequence. One may be all you need, Chen said softly, or it may not be enough. Wei squared her shoulders. We'll be ready in 12 hours. The Goliath departed with little ceremony. No cheering crowds, no stirring speeches, just a ship slipping its orbital moorings and accelerating toward the outer reaches of the solar system, carrying 2,000 souls into the unknown. Wei stood on the bridge, watching Neptune's blue curve slip past on the view screen. FTL drives charged and ready, reported Lieutenant Commander Riker. Jump calculations complete. She nodded. Engage when ready. The stars stretched and blurred as the Goliath tore through the fabric of space-time, the experimental drive system pushing them beyond light speed toward the coordinates extracted from the Kryvax transmission. In her private quarters later that evening, Wei reviewed the sensor data from their previous encounter for the dozenth time. Something about the Kryvax ship had been bothering her, the way it moved, the way it reacted when damaged. Less like a vessel and more like. Her door chimed, interrupting her thoughts. Enter. Dr. Thorne stepped inside, looking even more haggard than when she'd last seen him. His hands clutched a data pad so tightly his knuckles were white. Commander, I've been analyzing the molecular structure of the debris we collected after the engagement, he said without preamble. It's not what we expected. We gestured for him to continue. The Kryvax ships aren't constructed, Thorne explained, his voice trained. They're grown. The molecular patterns suggest organic development accelerated by artificial means. These aren't ships with alien crews. The ships themselves are the aliens. Wei felt a chill run down her spine. Are you saying the vessels are alive? In a sense, yes. Bioengineered organisms with integrated technological components. And there's something else. He placed the pad on her desk, displaying complex molecular structures. The organic components show signs of genetic manipulation going back thousands of generations. These aren't natural evolutionary developments. They were created. Wei murmured. By whom? I don't know. But whatever the Kryvax are, Commander, they're not the original intelligence behind this technology. They're tools, weapons, perhaps, designed for a specific purpose. Before Wei could respond, the ship's alert system blared. She grabbed her uniform jacket. Continue your analysis, Doctor. I want to know what we're really fighting. On the bridge, organized chaos greeted her as officers rushed between stations. Report, she demanded. We're dropping out of FTL in 30 seconds, Riker informed her. Long-range sensors detecting multiple large objects at the target coordinates. Wei took her position in the command chair. Battle stations. Bring all defensive systems online, but hold weapons in standby. Let's see what we're dealing with first. The Goliath emerged from FTL in a region of space that should have been empty. Instead, the view screen filled with the sight of dozens of Kryvax vessels, some small scouts like they'd encountered before, others massive behemoths that dwarfed even the ship that had ambushed them. But it was the structure at the center of the fleet that seized everyone's attention. A massive, pulsating sphere of what appeared to be living metal, easily 20 times the size of the Goliath. Tendrils of energy snaked across its surface, and portions of it seemed to phase in and out of normal space. My God, whispered Imani from the sensor station. It's generating more mass than should be possible for an object that size. Have they detected us? Wei asked, her voice steady despite the overwhelming sight before them. No active scanning directed our way, Imani replied. They appear to be focused on the central structure. Wei studied the bizarre congregation. This wasn't a fleet preparing for attack. There was no logical formation, no strategic positioning. The Kryvax ships surrounded the sphere almost reverently. "Magnify the central structure," she ordered. The view screen zoomed in on the pulsating sphere. Its surface wasn't solid but composed of billions of interlocking cells that constantly rearranged themselves, creating hypnotic patterns that seemed almost mathematical in their precision. "It's transmitting," reported the communications officer. "Broadband signals across all frequencies. Not encrypted, but I can't make sense of it." "Let me hear it," Wei commanded. A sound filled the bridge, not mechanical or electronic, but a haunting rhythmic pattern that seemed to bypass the ears and resonate directly within the mind. Several crew members winced, covering their ears despite the sound not being physically painful. "Shut it off," Wei ordered after a few seconds. She turned to Thorne, who had joined them on the bridge. "Doctor, your analysis." The scientist's eyes were wide. "It's communicating. Not just transmitting data, but actively modulating the signal in response to the ships around it. It's like watching a hive respond to its queen." A chilling possibility formed in Wei's mind, or offspring responding to a parent. Wei made a decision. "We need more information. Prepare a stealth probe. I want detailed scans of that sphere." As the crew carried out her orders, Wei studied the alien assembly. If this was indeed the command center for the Kryvax, destroying it could potentially end the threat to Earth. But the Helios array was damaged. They'd get one shot at best. "Probe away," reported Katri from Tactical. "ETA to scanning range, 3 minutes." Those 3 minutes stretched into an eternity as the bridge crew held their collective breath. The probe slipped silently through space, approaching the outer perimeter of the gathered Kryvax ships. "Receiving telemetry," Imani announced. "Scanning central structure now, Commander." Imani's voice cracked with disbelief. "The sphere is generating a controlled singularity at its core." Thorne rushed to the sensor station, checking the readings himself. "That's not possible. The energy requirements alone would." "They've detected the probe," Katri interrupted urgently. "Multiple vessels breaking formation." On the view screen, several Kryvax ships peeled away from the sphere, accelerating toward the probe's position. A beam of energy lanced out, vaporizing the small device instantly. "They're scanning for the source," Riker reported tensely. "Active sensor suites heading our direction." Wei's mind raced through their options. Run, and potentially lead the Kryvax back to Earth. Fight, against overwhelming odds. Or, open a channel, she ordered. "All frequencies." The communications officer stared at her in shock. "Commander." "Do it," Wei insisted. "If that's their command center, let's talk to whoever's in charge." A channel opened, the signal directed toward the massive sphere at the center of the Kryvax formation. "This is Commander Ilara Wei of the Earth vessel Goliath," she announced, her voice steady. "We know you can understand us. We know you attacked our colonies without provocation, and now we know what you are." For several tense seconds, there was no response. Then the view screen flickered, and an image formed, not of an alien creature as many had expected, but of a shifting, pulsating mass of light that approximated a humanoid shape. "You should not be here," it said, its voice a symphony of overlapping tones that the ship's computer struggled to translate. "You should not have this vessel. You should not possess the sundering weapon." Wei stepped forward. "We built this ship. We created the weapon. In response to your attacks." The luminous figure seemed to ripple with what might have been surprise. "Impossible. You are too young, too primitive. The builder technologies are not yours to wield." "Builder technologies?" Wei pressed, sensing a critical revelation. "The ones who came before it," the entity replied. "The ones who created us to prepare the way. You have stolen their methods." Thorne stepped forward, unable to contain himself. "We didn't steal anything. Human innovation created our technologies." The luminous figure pulsed more intensely. unacceptable variance. All the merging species must develop along controlled pathways. Those who deviate must be pruned. A chill ran down Wei's spine as understanding dawned. That's why you attacked us. Not because we were a threat, but because we weren't developing the way you expected. You were designated for observation only, the entity confirmed. Your rapid technological acceleration marks you as aberrant, potentially dangerous. The protocol is clear. Protocol. Wei's voice hardened. You slaughtered millions because we didn't fit your protocol. The greater design must be preserved, the entity stated without emotion. Your kind develops weapons before wisdom. You cannot be permitted to expand further. On the tactical display, Wei noticed the Kryvac ships beginning to move into attack formation. They were out of time. Dr. Thorne, she said quietly, is the Helios array operational? Yes, he replied just as softly. But Commander, at this range, against that many targets. I don't want to target the ships, Wei interrupted. I want to target the singularity at the core of that sphere. Thorne paled. The resulting reaction could be catastrophic. We might not escape the blast radius. Weed nodded grimly. Plot an FTL jump course. Execute the moment the array fires. She turned back to the view screen, to the luminous entity that had so casually condemned her species. You say we develop weapons before wisdom. She addressed it. Perhaps you're right. But here's what you failed to understand about humans. We learn fast. She cut the transmission with a gesture. Target the sphere's core. Full power to the Helios array. Target locked. Chatri confirmed, his hand steady despite the enormity of what they were about to attempt. Wei took one last look at her crew, scientists and engineers who had become reluctant warriors in a war they never asked for. Fire. The Goliath shuddered as the Helios array discharged at full power. The beam, invisible to normal sight, but leaving a distortion in space itself, struck the massive sphere precisely at its center. For a moment, nothing happened. Then reality seemed to bend. The controlled singularity at the sphere's core, suddenly destabilized by the array's molecular disruption effect, began to collapse in on itself. The sphere's surface rippled violently as if in pain, the mathematical patterns breaking down into chaos. Jump now, Wei ordered. The Goliath's FTL drive engaged just as the sphere imploded, creating a blinding flash that momentarily outshone everything else on the view screen. The ship shuddered violently as the edge of the shockwave caught them. Systems overloading across all decks. For several minutes, alarms blared and crew members fought to stabilize critical systems. When they finally dropped out of FTL, the Goliath was damaged but intact, drifting in empty space far from the Krevak's assembly point. Damage report, Wei called out, pulling herself up from the floor where the violent exit from FTL had thrown her. Multiple system failures, Riker reported, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. FTL drive is offline. Conventional engines at 30%. The Helios array, he checked his console, completely burned out, Commander. The capacitors are fused. We nodded, having expected nothing less. Casualties. Reports still coming in. At least 12 dead, dozens injured. She closed her eyes briefly, honoring the sacrifice. Long-range sensors. Did we get any readings on the aftermath? Imani worked her console with shaking hands. Last telemetry before we jumped shows a cascading quantum collapse centered on the sphere. The singularity, it didn't just destabilize, Commander. It inverted. Meaning what exactly? Wei asked. Dr. Thorne, who had somehow remained at his station, looked up with awe in his eyes. It created a temporary rupture in space-time. The sphere, the Kryvac ships, they weren't destroyed so much as removed from our reality. Wei absorbed this information silently. They had intended to destroy the Krivak's command center. Instead, they had potentially sent it somewhere else. Whether that was victory or simply a postponement of the conflict, only time would tell. Set course for Earth, she ordered. best possible speed with conventional engines. As the damaged Star Destroyer began its long journey home, Wei returned once more to the observation deck. The stars looked different to her now, not cold and distant, nor battlefields waiting to happen, but a vast mystery still unfolding. They had struck a blow against a force that had culled species across countless worlds for whom knew how long. They had proven humanity wouldn't quietly accept extinction, but they had also glimpsed something far larger than their conflict with the Kryvax. Hints of precursor civilizations, of cosmic designs and protocols spanning eons. The Goliath had roared into the void, and the void had answered back with revelations none of them were prepared for. Her comm unit chimed. "Commander," Riker's voice came through. "We've picked up something unusual. A transmission, not Kryvax in origin, detected during our FTL jump." Wei frowned. "Source? Unknown, but the language patterns." He hesitated. "They're similar to early human languages, Commander. It's as if something out there recognized us." A chill ran down Wei's spine. Content. Just 3 words, repeating, "Found you again." Wei stared out at the stars, suddenly feeling very small despite commanding the most powerful ship humanity had ever built. "Record it," she said quietly, "and increase scanner range. I want to know if anything's following us home." As the Goliath continued its journey back to Earth, the message repeated endlessly on a secured channel, a whisper from the depths of space that raised more questions than it answered. "Found you again. Found you again. Found you again." Whatever humanity had awakened out there in the darkness between stars, Wei suspected their war with the Kryvax would soon seem like only the beginning. The void had answered humanity's roar not with silence, but with a voice of its own, ancient, knowing, and terribly familiar.